Right, so let's begin with adding the grass. So for the grass, I'm simply going to go to foliage mode, and just going to be browsing to the grass which I just downloaded, which we downloaded in the previous render. If you don't have that, you can simply go to add Quixel content. So once Quixel Bridge has been opened, you can just simply go hover over this home icon right here. You can go to 3D plants and grass. And now from here, you can download any grass which you want. But the one which I downloaded last time was this Kikuyu grass. I think that's what it's called. So you can just download it and add it in your scene. So once it is added, you can simply select the first mesh, go to the end, select the last mesh, and drag them inside the foliage. Now also make sure that you select all of them and you check them all so that they're all enabled. And now you can simply go ahead and start painting. So let's try painting it. So the problem which I'm facing right now is the fact that they're way too large. So the scale, I'm going to be setting it to something like 0.2 and the max to something like 0.4. Yeah, that should be fine. But now the problem is that the density is way too low. So you can see the density is pretty less. So I'm just going to be setting this to 200. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using the other viewport as well to make sure that I only paint in areas which are going to be visible by the visible in the view of the camera, because obviously we don't want to waste any assets, because if we add too much foliage, then it's going to slow down our computer too much, and even if the foliage is not visible, then that's basically a waste of resources. That's not something which we want to do. So I'm only going to be painting them in this area, something like that, and so it looks pretty decent, doesn't it? I'm going to go back to selection mode and let's try to go into path tracing mode and let's see how it looks. So as you can see, path tracing looks a lot better, and there's no competition between path tracing and ray tracing right now. But anyway, so you can choose whichever one you want. Of course, path tracing is going to take a lot longer to render. Anyways, so now once that is done, we can simply go ahead and apply a material to the landscape, because right now we don't have any landscape material, which looks pretty bad. So I'm just going to go to add Quixel content. And we can just simply search for grass and go down, just add something like this, mossy grass. And I can just go ahead and add the low quality one. I think I did download one of them. I think I should have a grass texture right here, so I don't need to download another one. But yeah, you can just go ahead and download them if you want. Yeah, mossy grass right here. And I'm just going to be applying it to the landscape. But the way you apply it to a landscape is by selecting the landscape first, going down to landscape material, and then you can just drag this and drop it right there. So now you're going to see it's going to fill in some of those gaps and it's going to look pretty decent. Right, so now let's go back to path tracing, and now we can simply go ahead and start with the lighting first. So for the lighting, I'm simply going to be messing around with the directional light. So once that is selected, I can go ahead and select the move tool and I can move it. Let me just go back to world coordinates. I'm just going to be placing it such that it is visible in our scene from this viewport so that I can directly edit it from here. I'm simply going to be placing it right there. And now I can simply go ahead and rotate this without the need of using another viewport. Now, obviously, this is something which is entirely personal preference. You can just choose whichever lighting you think looks the best. I might go with something like this. I think this looks pretty decent. The reflections in the cars are pretty good. Now this is this scene is basically in what do you call it, with the lit mode. If we viewed this scene in path tracing, then it would look similar to this as well. Now obviously these scenes are pretty different. However, that is because I'm going for a slightly different aesthetic this time. Of course, you can just bring it down and you can make it look pretty similar to this scene as well if you want. However, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going for something a little different. And that's something which I would recommend you to do. Never make an artwork twice. Once you're done with an artwork, be sure to create something else and something different, because that's really going to test your creativity and it's going to make it's going to really enhance your creative instincts. So now let's add the mountains at the back, and then we're going to be adding the trees, and then we'll be done. All right. So firstly, what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to go down. I'm going to go to add Quixel content, and then I can just simply search for mountain. I do have that in my search history. And now I can go down, and the one which I used in the previous render was this one, gigantic sandstone terrain. And so I'm just going to be using that same exact one, and I already do have it inside my folder, so I'm just going to be using that. Yeah, gigantic sandstone terrain. I'm just going to be dragging this right here. And you know what, let me just get out of path tracing for now, and let's go to viewport 2 so that we can position it properly. Now right now you can see that it's absolutely massive, so I'm just going to have to scale it down slightly. Something like that should be good. Let's bring it back. I'm gonna have to move it quite far away. Then do something like that, and maybe scale it up slightly. And so right now you're gonna see that it looks pretty good. However, we want some fog in this scene. So to add fog, what I'm gonna do is that let me place it right there. Let's first make the whole mountain range. Something like that should be good. Yeah, I think that looks pretty decent. However, there's very little fog, so I'm just going to go to exponential height fog. And first, let me go ahead and make sure that volumetric fog is turned on. You're going to see that it looks a lot better. And now I'm just going to reduce the density maybe. So 0.01, something like that should be good. And I think our scene looks pretty decent, doesn't it? It is, I think it looks a lot better than this previous one. This one, I think our scene now looks a lot better. And so this is how it looks in path tracing, and this is how it looks in lit mode. I think it looks pretty decent in both of them. However, I think it comes down to personal preference. So yeah, there's that. And now let's add the trees. So for the trees, we're going to be using Megascans trees. However, that is not something which, by the way, just save your project. That is not something which you can find in the Quixel bridge. You're going to have to go to Epic Game Store again, and you're going to have to download the whole tree pack, which is made by Megascans. It's free, you can just download it, but the download size is pretty large. Alright, so once you are in the Epic Games launcher, you can just go to Marketplace, and here I want you to search for Megascans tree. And so now you basically have two options right now. One is this European hornbeam tree, and the other one is this European black alder. Right, so I'm gonna be using this. Both of these are basically tree collections, and they're pretty good. They're pretty realistic, and I think they're gonna look pretty good. So once you have downloaded it, you can just simply add it to project, and the download size is yeah, it's 8.7 gigabytes. So it's a pretty large download. But once you have it in your scene, it looks pretty good. Right, so I'm just gonna open this black alder folder, and inside here, I'm simply gonna go down to geometry, pivot painter, and I'm just going to be using this tree right here. So right now the size is way too large. Let me just place it right there for now. And so I'm just going to be scaling it down. And obviously this is the part which it's just based on personal preference. You can use whichever tree which you want. You can use you can place it wherever you want. So I would recommend you to not copy my layout. Just come up with something which is more unique. You know what, let me just go to the second viewport, and let's just place the tree using this so that we have a better control. I think something like that should be good. I think that should be pretty decent. Now make sure that the tree is not actually intersecting with the car and it's actually away. Yeah, it is. All right, perfect. Now let's look at this in the path tracing view, how it looks. I think it looks much better in the path tracing view, of course. And let's come back to lit mode, and let's duplicate this tree, and let's place it in the front right here. Basically we're going to be adding some depth of field, and it's going to be blurred, so I think that's going to look pretty good. Hold Alt on your keyboard and then just drag it to duplicate it, and perfect. Place it right there, and I'm just going to scale this down quite a lot, maybe something like that. You know what, let me just go nearer to this tree, and let's move it up, because right now it's covering too much of the scene. Move it away slightly, something like that, and it's looking pretty good. However, of course, right now we don't have the depth of field activated, So I'm just going to go to my Cine Camera actor. Let's go down to focus method. Instead of disable, we disabled it previously, if you remember. I'm just going to set it to manual. And now this depth of field, I'm just going to set it to, I'm just going to tweak this focus distance until it is looking good. All right, so I think it looks pretty good. Now let's go to the path tracing view and let's see how it looks in that. I think it looks pretty decent. However, there are some things, for example, these backlights, which apparently for some reason have that metal material. We made that mistake before, and so I'm just going to be fixing those. Apart from that, I think everything else looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, the only thing which I'm going to do is that I'm just going to be moving the steering wheel from the left hand side to the right hand side, because there are two things. Basically, it's not visible right now, and I want it to be visible. And secondly, I live in Pakistan where we have right hand, we have our steering wheels are basically on the right hand side. So yeah, I just want to make it look like Pakistan. Perfect. So I think that looks pretty good. And apart from that, everything else seems to be good. Let me just work on those lights. I'm just going to go to materials, exterior, and inside the exterior, I'm just going to go down to lights. Let's just apply this light. Let's try it out. Let's see how it looks. It's currently compiling the shaders. All right, so I'm not that big of a fan. Let me just get out of my path tracing mode. Let's get out of my camera too, and let's see how it looks. All right, so right now the problem is that if I just bring this forward, you're going to see that do we have a bulb inside it? Okay, so we don't. So we have two options. Either we can apply this sort of a material to this with, if I just reduce the tint, let's see how it looks now. Let's go to path tracing. Now it looks pretty bad, to be honest. Let's undo that change. I'm just going to set it back to default. Never mind. I think I messed this material up, so I'm just going to be undoing it. Let's set this tint to red, something like that, and the edge tint to a shade of red as well. Now let's go back to our camera to see how it looks from that perspective. It doesn't really look that good, to be honest, so I'm just going to be applying this light material to this. However, it's pretty bright right now. I'm going to have to reduce the power, of course. I'm just going to set it to 1. Actually, I think this looks even worse, to be honest. How about I just set it to that? Yeah, I think this is fine. Yeah, it's pretty good. You can maybe tweak around with the material a little bit to make it look even better, but I think it's not bad. Something like that is good. And Fresnel power, let's tweak around. Nope, I don't think that matters that much. And I think we are looking pretty good. Yeah. All right, so that is done. And what's this thing right here? I'm also going to be tweaking the metal material as well, because I think it's a little too bright for now. What's this thing? I don't really seem to understand it. Let's go back to lit mode. Okay, so it's fine in lit mode, but it comes up in path tracing. So let's address this issue. And there are a lot of problems which are going to come up when you're designing 3D models. So I would recommend you to just yeah, so it's basically this object right here. So I'm just going to delete that. I think there was a problem with the normals, so I guess we're fine. Or if you do want this thing to be on the other side as well, you can simply duplicate it like that, and then you can go to the scale mode and make sure that the scale snapping is turned on, and then you can just scale it -1, basically in the opposite direction, so that it basically mirrors the object. So that's a quick tip for you guys, and now it's gonna be looking pretty good. I'm just gonna go back to path tracing, and now that issue is fixed. Let's go back to our camera. Let's see how it looks. This looks pretty good. Number plate is looking good. This Porsche logo should have this metal material. That's looking good as well. This is fine, perfect. This part is looking pretty good. One thing which I am going to be doing is that I'm going to be setting the exposure to manual. Also, by the way, guys, one thing which you are going to be noticing right now is that the depth of field does not look good in path tracing. And the reason for that is because by default, the reflections don't look good in path tracing. So if I just go to my post-process volume, and if I go down to, I think it was up. Yeah, path tracing. If I go to these path tracing settings, and if I turn this reference depth of field on, now you're going to see that the depth of field is going to look a lot better, right? So it looks pretty good. And another thing which I am going to be doing is that I'm going to be reducing the exposure of this scene. So let me go up to exposure, and now this metering mode, I'm going to set it to manual, and I'm just going to set the exposure compensation to like 10, maybe 11, maybe 12. 12 is too much. 11.5, how about that? I think 11.5 should be the sweet spot, and it looks pretty decent. I might want to increase the scale of this tree though, because I think it looks pretty small. Never mind, I'm just gonna first turn off the snapping and then I'm gonna be scaling it up. Oops, make sure to scale it in all axes. Something like that should be good, and maybe move it across. I think that looks pretty decent. Perfect, so our scene is looking pretty good. I might want to move this slightly there so that it's more visible. I might actually want to duplicate this and place it so that it's visible behind this as well. I think that should look pretty good. All right, perfect. So our scene is looking pretty good. And the only thing which I might want to change is gonna be what do you call it? The clouds. So I'm just gonna go to volumetric clouds, and let's try to mess around with the settings a little bit to make them a little more visible. Actually, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of liking the vibe of the clear sky, so I'm just gonna leave it there. Yeah, so that's gonna be our scene. Now, obviously, it is a little different than this. Also, by the way, I forgot to add that man, so I'm just gonna be adding that now. I think we imported it right here. Yep, so now we're gonna have to import an animation of this man. Actually, you know what? For this scene, I'm just gonna be having it stand right next to the car. Although you can obviously import the animation if you want from Mixamo. I did show you how to do that in the previous tutorial, in the previous part of the course. And so we can just make it stand somewhere like that behind the car. I think that should look pretty good. Okay, so it's intersecting the car. All right, so I think our whole scene looks pretty decent, and now it's time to go ahead and render this. So with the rendering, I'm actually gonna remove this man because I don't personally like this guy. However, my job was just to show you how to do things. If you like that guy, then you can definitely add it. And yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and render this. So just make sure that everything is fine, which it seems to be, and let's tweak around the lighting a little bit. So that's a pretty good vibe as well. If that's something which you're going for, that is a pretty good look. As you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of options with Unreal Engine, you can do whatever you want. But I think that should be pretty good. So now once you are done with your scene, especially in path tracing, if for example, if you are in lit mode, then of course you can just simply go ahead and take a high resolution screenshot and just set the multiplier to something like 2, and then just press capture, and it's going to save it. I'm just going to show you how to do that. Just press capture, and it's going to open, it's going to show you this path. You just click this and you're going to see this screenshot being saved, right? So but if you want to use path tracing, then you're going to have to give it a bit. Okay, so right now we're having this weird issue in which basically the directional light is appearing behind the shadow. So I'm just going to press G on my keyboard so that it hides that. And so I'm just going to be going to path tracing. And so with this path tracing mode, you're going to have to let this bar complete and let this whole scene render, and then it's going to denoise it for you. And after that is done, you can just simply go ahead and take a high resolution screenshot. So that's how you do it in path tracing. All right, guys, so that's basically it for this one. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you learned something new. So yeah, that's basically it for this one, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.